It's generally accepted knowledge that the West will never see as many shooters released on its consoles as Japan will. These days, it's just no exception, but if you're into shmups, the Xbox 360 is the only system worth noting for new shooters no matter where you live. The Xbox Live Arcade has seen a number of shooters released so far this year, and one of the most notable is G.Rev's Strania, the Stella Machina. At just 800 Microsoft points, it's a comparative bargain at a time when the typical map pack or arcade game costs 1200 points. But competitive pricing isn't all there is to look at. Strania also has some decent features up its sleeve as well. Unlike many other vertical shooters found on the Xbox 360 with a Tate aspect ratio, Strania has the uncommon distinction of having a wider play area than it is high. This would normally mean that a player wouldn't have the same reaction time to avoid enemies, as there's less advanced warning to oncoming obstacles. But Strania's dynamic camera angles show you the future waves that you'll contend with, despite having a more or less 4-3 playfield, thereby making things a bit more predictable. But it's still a very challenging game. You'll notice that there is a cross-shaped marker over your mech as well. This is useful for aiming, sure, but it's also an indicator that shows where you'll die if you get hit. The point where the two lines meet is your hitbox. It's rather uncommon for a non-bullet hell shooter to have this type of a hitbox, but there will be times where you'll say, "Ah, that's why," when you find yourself in a tiny 7-pixel crack of safety. The control is also spot on, making dodging enemy fire rather easy. On that subject, Strania also goes with a more methodical approach to enemy fire and bullet patterns. Unlike most modern shooters trying to subdue players with a ridiculous curtain of death, Strania is much more reserved and instead derives much of its challenge from having enemies approach in 360 degrees, and having the player have the right weapon for the job at the right time. And man, do you have a lot of choice. Everything from rapid-fire Vulcans to reflective shots, sideway firing guns to piercing lasers, swords, bombs, and missiles. You'd be hard-pressed not to find a weapon that will work well for you in any situation. But not only do you have access to all these fine implements of destruction, but you can carry 3 at a time, and use up to 2 of them at once. How you pick these up in terms of position will determine what hand your mech will hold it though, so care can be required if you don't want to lose your favorite weapon when you want to replace the other. But it doesn't end there. Each of the weapons has a level associated with them. The more you use a certain type of weapon, the stronger it will get. So if you're proficient with, say, the sword, its level will go up, making it extremely powerful and requiring less hits to take out big things, meaning you don't need to be up close and personal for as long a time. These features come together rather well, and with such flexibility and moderate depth, it makes Strania quite the fun game to play through. Now on to the meaty stuff. Strania gets pretty challenging later on, and you don't have lives per se, but you do have an armor stock, so getting armor extends is a pretty important thing for achieving not only a high score, but also that coveted 1cc. Aside from your typical points for exploding your opposition, if you can make it through the stage with a no miss, you get the highest rank, S, and a huge bonus to go with it. But you can also get up to a 2x bonus while taking out enemies with your overdose engaged. While taking out your opposition, the overdose gauge will build as you destroy your enemies until it reaches max, at which point you can activate it. Not only are you invincible for a short time, but your score will mount from 1.1x to 2x as you take out enemy craft while the gauge depletes. You'll increase your score multiplier if your enemies are bigger or harder to kill as well. Paired with the sharp controls that Strania offers, it's more than possible to get enough extends to make it through to the end on 1 credit. If you have working eyes and ears, there's really not much to say here. Instead, here's a bunch of ridiculously gorgeous explosions. Whoa, wait, it's not quite over. There's also an expansion available for 400 Microsoft points that allows players to go through the game on the enemy side. It's much more difficult than the standard game as well, so if you're up for a challenge, this is the add-on for you. Additionally, the stages themselves are remixed to the point of being all new, and presented in reverse order. Not only that, there are also brand new music tracks as well. Overall, well worth the $5. And it adds a ton to the longevity of Strania as a whole. So, how does Strania stack up? Let's take a look. If you're surprised at this score, well, so was I. The control is really tight, allowing you to move your ship around with the greatest of ease. A really tiny hitbox also means that you can find safety in the tiniest of places. The length is also off the charts thanks to the side Vower expansion, which, for all intents and purposes, adds an entirely new game. The challenge is also relatively high. The visuals and sound are both fantastic in this game as well. The soundtrack is strong and varied throughout the entire game, and the explosions are extremely pretty. And finally, on the ingenuity front, it doesn't score as high as it should, because the core mechanics have already been done in a little game called Einhander. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. As it is, Strania, the Stella Machina, comes very highly recommended. And hey, in an age where 1200 points would only get you one game, to get 2 games for the same price, well, that's always a good thing. But you do have an armor stock, so getting extends is... Oh wait, this is the wrong microphone.